Well, good morning. This morning we read Ezra chapter 4 and 5. I must admit I struggle with these first verses of Ezra chapter 4. First of all, it records the people who live in the land, who became the Samaritans that we read about in the New Testament, were enemies of Judah and Benjamin. But were they really enemies? I mean, I guess the returning exiles would have taken land that the Samaritans were used to occupying, so there would be some tensions, I imagine. But they came to the people of Israel and said, "Let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God and have been sacrificing since the time we were brought here." And that's true. You can read about it in 2 Kings, how the Assyrians would scatter people from every land into other lands so that they couldn't join together and overthrow them. And so he removed all the Israelites from Israel and he put in people from other nations. But when he did so, God said, "This is my land," and demanded that he be worshipped. And the kings of Assyria had to send priests and scribes to train the people who they brought to the land of Israel how to worship. So these people had been worshipping God all of that time, and they offered to help. And of course, the prophecies in Isaiah were that God was going to make his temple a house of prayer for all nations. It was not to be exclusively for the Jews, but the people of Israel rejected that help. And they were so discouraged, their enemies, the Samaritans, were so discouraged that they began to try and frustrate the work. I can't help wondering if that was the right thing to do, whether or not the people of Israel should have welcomed the help from the people who were already in the land. Whoever's fault it was, it did cause enmity between the two, and now the Samaritan people were trying to stop the building of the temple, and they wrote to the king of Persia and accused the Israelites of trying to rebuild the walls of the city so that it could become an enclave against the might of the Babylonian Empire. And the king, for that reason, stopped them building the house of the Lord. But then they stirred up when that king died and Darius became king. The people heard a word from the Lord from Haggai and Zechariah and began to build again the temple of God. Notice this King Darius. Who was Darius's right-hand man? You know the book of Daniel. Daniel was there as chief counselor to the king. God had put his person in place. So when they wrote this letter, just to check to see if the people of Israel were allowed to build the temple, God had his man, his people of influence in place. And we'll read in the next time we return to this passage what happened next. So some challenges for us. Do we welcome help from those who are truly seeking to serve God? Or do we reject it and demand purity? Were the people of Israel right at the beginning of this passage or wrong? You can answer it for yourself. So did they bring this enmity upon themselves? And the second part of this, the second challenge here or the second thought here, is that God puts his people in place, that his will is not thwarted, his will is carried through. God has already put in place those who will bring to bear the influence of God, and his kingdom will go forward.